Okay, today we're going to be working with text and styles. So the first thing I'd like you to do is to create a new file. So we want to go to the File menu and say New. Now you'll get this dialog box here, and these are the dimensions that I would like you to put in. It should be width 1000 pixels, height 600 pixels. If it doesn't say pixels, then you can go into this menu and you can change it to pixels. That should change both of them together. Everything else should be the same. It should be resolution 72 pixels per inch. That is kind of important. And it should be RGB color, and the background should be white. But probably the only thing you need to set is the 1000 and the 600. So I'm going to say OK. And now we've got our canvas. All right, well, the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to give us a backdrop. Now, if you try to apply a style, which is over here, by the way, if you try to apply a style to the backdrop, it doesn't work. So what we want to do is that we want to take the background and we want to copy and paste. Now, there are two ways you can do that. One, you can do it with the menus. You can go to the Select menu and you can choose All. Then you can go to the Edit menu and then choose Copy and then Paste. Another way to do it is using the keyboard shortcuts, in which you would select Control-A to select all, then Control-C to copy, and Control-V to paste. So you can do it with the keyboard shortcuts or you can do it with the menus. In the end, you should have a second layer above the background, and this is something that we can apply a style to. Now, I have my styles open right here. If you don't see the styles, check all of your palettes on the right side and see if you can't find one that says Styles. If you don't see it here, go to the Window menu, look for Styles here, and if it has a check mark, it means that it's already open. You should look for it again. But if there's no check mark, you can click this and Styles should appear somewhere. Now you have about a dozen or so styles listed here, and the one I'd like you to use today is this one. It looks kind of light blue with chiseled edges, and if you click on that, you will see that you get a nice gradient. You'll see that at the edges you've got a little bit of a beveled edge there, a chiseled edge. So this is going to serve as our background. Notice that when you look again at the layers, layer 1 now has certain effects. If you want to hide the effects, you can click on this little button right there. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to create text. I'd like to create the text LCJ in big letters, and then in smaller letters, I'd like to create the text Lakeland College, Japan. Now, another palette that you might have to find here is this one. It's the character palette. Once again, if you go to your Windows and you look, you should find character here. If you can't find it anywhere else, you can just click on it in this menu and it will pop up just like that. Excuse me. All right, so you want to make sure that your font is set to impact. If it's not set there already, you can either type it in here directly, or you can just go to it in the menu and click on Impact. I'd like you to set the color to be white. So that means that if you click on this little white bar right here, you'll get a color picker, and make sure that you set it so that it's in the top left corner. So that should mean it's white. Click OK, and now the color is white. Now, the first text that we make, I'd like to make it 500 point. So if it's not there already, you can just type in 500, hit Enter, and now it should be set to 500 point. Okay, so what we want to do now is create the text box. So go over to the left, click on the letter T in the toolbar, and you'll notice that now your cursor looks like a little I-beam. Start in the top left corner, click, and then drag down about maybe 3/4 of the way. So try to fill in that the top 3/4 of that box. So now we can type our letters L, When you've typed in those letters, you should be able to see them. If you can't see them, it's probably because your box is too small. You'll notice at the bottom there are these boxes here, these handles, and if you click on them and drag them up or down, you'll notice that if it's too small for the text will not appear. So if the text did not appear when you typed LCJ, click on that box on the bottom middle and keep pulling down until you can see the characters. You should see them eventually. Once you have this, just select some other tool. I like to select the this tool right up here, the Move tool, and then if you click on it, then the editing should now stop. So now you can move it around if that's what you want to do. Try to make sure it's in the center, a little bit below the top, and now you can see in the layers palette, you can see you have the background, you can see we have the layer 1, that's what we put the style on, and now we've got LCJ. So make sure, of course, that LCJ is selected for the next steps. So what are we going to do? Well, what I'd like to do is create some styles. Well, as I showed you before, we have a styles palette over here. We could just click on some of these and get some crazy effects and see what they are, but I would like to have an effect that we create by ourselves. So if you accidentally clicked on one of these styles, the way to erase it is to click up here, this little white box with a red stripe through it. That means no styles, so that'll erase the styles. So hopefully you should be just looking at the big letters LCJ in the impact font with no styles at all, just plain white. To get into the styles editor, you want to go into the layers palette, and you want to go to where you have the text box with LCJ, go into a blank area on the right of that layer and double click. When you double click like that, you should get the layer style box. Now in the layer style dialog box, you'll be able to see that there are a lot of categories over here on the left side. If you click on any of them, it will activate them, and you'll see changes beginning to appear. If you want to turn them off, just click inside the checkbox and they'll disappear. You can click at the top here if you want to avoid being selected in any one of them. So let's begin to change, and you'll see the changes happening live over here on the left. The first thing we're going to do is bevel and emboss. If you just check it, then the change will come, but you cannot see the options. So you want to make sure you actually click on the bevel and emboss. You'll see it turn blue like this. So we're going to change a couple of these things. First of all, we're going to change the technique. Instead of smooth, we're going to use chisel hard. You'll see that that changes the appearance over here. The size we're going to increase to 15, and the soften we're going to increase to 5. You'll see that that makes another change over here. So next we're going to go to this bar right here, this one called contour. So click on that. You'll see it activates, it turns it a little bit darker. We're going to click on this contour box. Don't click in the middle. If you do that, you'll get a different window. You have to close it. Instead, click on this little arrow to the right. So we're going to click on that, and you'll see a lot of different contours here. If you click on them, you'll see that they change the letters in various ways. We're going to choose this one. It's the third from the left on the top row. When you're finished, just click outside of that. Let's change the range. I'm going to make the range a little bit higher, maybe about 60. That's probably not necessary, but it's a little tweak. And now we're finished with the contour. The next thing we're going to do is go to Inner Shadow. Inner Shadow is right here. Click on that. You'll see the inner shadow show up a little bit. We're going to change the distance from 5 to 15. And we're going to change the size from 5 to 15 also. You'll see that makes the top left a little bit darker. Again, we're going to change the contour right here. Again, don't click on the main box, click on the little arrow over here. And this time we're going to choose the third from the left on the bottom row. And you can see that added a nice little kind of metallic effect over on the text. And that's it for inner shadow. The next thing we're going to go to is satin. So click on satin. You'll notice that everything just turned kind of dark. So we want to change some things here. One of the things that we want to do is change the angle. You'll notice the angle says 19 degrees. If you click and roll this over, let's change it to something more like about 170 degrees. Doesn't seem to change very much yet. We're going to change the distance to 50. You'll see that creates a much nicer metallic effect. And we're going to change the size to 20. There we go. So you'll see that makes a very, very nice effect. We're getting into a metallic kind of texture here. So we have one more to go, and that is the drop shadow. So let's go all the way down to drop shadow. And once you click on it, you see you get a nice little shadow underneath it. We're going to change the distance to 15. You'll see that makes a much bigger shadow. And we're going to change the size to much bigger. It's going to be 25. So that makes a very blurred shadow behind your LCJ. And that's it. So we have bevel and emboss, contour, inner shadow, satin, and drop shadow. I'll write all these down in the instructions so you'll be able to do this without having to look back to the video. When you finish, click OK, and wow, look at that. We've got a really cool looking LCJ here. So our next step is to create the words Lakeland College, Japan underneath the bigger LCJ. So again, we're going to create a text box. So you're going to go to the T tool on the left, click on that, and you'll want to make a box which is wider than this LCJ, just so we can fit everything in. Begin at the bottom, about right here, and then click and drag so you can make a text box that kind of looks like this. It should be taking up most of the space on the bottom, and it should be a little bit wider than the LCJ above it. Now, right now, you won't see any text because our font size is set too big. If you go back to the character palette, you'll notice that the font size is set to 500. We want to set it to something much smaller. I'm going to set it to 60 point. You can type in 60, hit enter, and now you should be able to see the flashing text cursor there. If you can't find the character box in the palettes, you can also set the font size over here in the toolbar at the top when you've selected the text tool. So now we've got it set to impact and 60 points. So in all capital letters, type Lakeland College, Japan. When you're finished, click on the Move tool at the top left again. And if you need to adjust, if you need to set it so that it's in a different position, you can do that right now. And right now it doesn't look like much, but we're going to add more styling to it. So once again, if you go down here on the right, at the bottom to where we have the layers, this is the one we were just working on before. You can click on this arrow to collapse it. We want to change the styling for this layer, the one which is a text box and it says Lakeland College, Japan. If you double click on the name, it'll just mean you change the name. You have to go way over here to the corner to where there's no letters and then double click there. And again, you'll get the layer style dialog box. So we're going to do this again, except this time we're going to take a look and change the letters Lakeland College, Japan. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Bevel and Emboss, the same as before. Click on that. It should be inner bevel, and it should be smooth. Now, that should probably be what it's already set to. But we're going to change the depth, and we're going to change the size. Right now the depth is 100%, and we're going to change it to 500%. Don't worry, this will make sense later. Then we're going to change the size to be much bigger. That's going to be 100. And you'll see that we get a kind of a nice, interesting black and white gradient effect there. So that's all we do. So turn on the bevel and emboss and change the depth to 500% and the size to 100%. The next thing we're going to do is go to the stroke area. Click on that. You'll see it makes an outline around the letters. We're going to change the size down to 1 pixel. We're going to change the position to inside. And then we're going to change the opacity to 50%. So that makes the outline a little bit more mild and something that's going to look much better after we finish everything else. So that's the stroke. The next thing we're going to do is the gradient. We're going to go down to Gradient Overlay right here and click on that. Now you'll see many controls here. One of the things we want to make sure is that the style is linear. That's what I have set automatically. And here where you see the gradient, if you click on that little box, this box right here, it'll give you a box which shows you the gradients that you can use. Now this is the one that we want to use, but you see these little boxes at the ends. You want to take this box right here at the bottom left, you want to click on the black part of the box and you want to pull it over all the way over here. So it's at about 70%. This should say 70%. You'll notice that makes our letters a lot more dark, and it has a kind of like a nice white shiny character at the top. So once you do that, change this box so that the location is 70%. You can say OK. All right, now just one more thing. We're going to go to the drop shadow, and under the drop shadow, 75% is too much. We're going to change the opacity to 50%. Close is OK. We're going to change the distance to 5 if it's not already there, and the size should also be 5 if it's not already there. And that's it. So now you can click OK, and you can see that you have a very nice, cool looking Lakeland College, Japan. If you want to center things, if you want to center things, you should be able to select them and move them down. I'm going to select the LCJ layer and move that down and center them so that they look a little bit better. And that is what you have to do. That's all that you have to do right there. So this is the project. Once you've done this, you should save it. I want you to save it again as a Photoshop document. So you'll want to go to the File menu, go to either Save or Save As. Either should be okay, especially if you've got it set as Untitled. Go to File and then Save or Save As. Go to your desktop. Save this as a Photoshop, a PSD file, and change the name to your name, week 3. So I'm going to put Luis Poza. I'm going to put a little hyphen there. Week 3, you don't need the hyphen. All you need is your name and week 3. Make sure you save it on your desktop, and now it's done. So now that you've done that, you can take the file from your desktop, go into the public folder, go into the graphics project folder, find your name folder, and drop this file into your name folder. So this is kind of a small tutorial as to how you can style text. You can see that we started out with a very plain kind of style. Let me bring this back. We started out with just kind of blank text like that, but by applying styles, we were able to give them some really cool appearances. So there are ways that you can do this quickly, but you have only a limited number of styles. You can create styles by going in and changing each one bit by bit. Okay, I'd like to show you one little thing. It's a little extra credit. You don't have to do this, but you've just worked very hard to make these styles exactly the way that you want them. So if you want to create the same style again, you don't want to have to take about 10 minutes again to create this style. So how can you save all of these settings? Well, it turns out that you can create your own styles up here. What you have to do first is make sure that you have selected the correct layer. So I want to copy the style, which is on these big letters, LCJ, and I want to click on that layer, not the Lakeland College Japan, but the LCJ layer. And now, if you go up to the Styles palette, you'll notice there's a little menu right up here, at the top right. If you click on that and say New Style, you'll get a dialog box. Now this will show the style here. It looks a little bit strange, but this is the style that you've just created. It automatically uses the style that you've selected. So I'm going to call this Luis01, and I'm going to click OK. You'll notice that now I've suddenly got a New Style button over here. So how can I use that? Well, that style will stay with you when you create new documents. You can quit Photoshop, and then when you open it up again, you'll get that new style again. So I'm going to create a new blank document. I'm going to very quickly do many of the things that we did before, give us a background. I'm going to make sure my font size is 500 point impact, and I'm going to create that LCJ again. I'm just doing this really quickly. There we go, LCJ. But now, instead of going through all those steps, because I saved them in this style, I'm just going to click on this button and boom, all the styles come in all at once. By the way, after you've styled the text, you can still edit it. You can, for example, say my initials are LHP. Whenever you type, it'll come out in that new style. So this is how you create styles and text in Adobe Photoshop. So you might want to fool around with it some. For example, let's say we have the LCJ layer here. If I double click on that to get the styles, one really quick cool effect is to go to this one called Color Overlay. And you can see it makes it look kind of like a jewel appearance. The color is decided by this little box over here. If you click on that box, you can choose any color that you want. So I can choose blue, or I can choose green, I can choose yellow, I can choose purple. So you can also just click in here and choose whatever variant of those that you think is best. Bright colors tend to work better. And then you've got yourself a nice jeweled appearance. If you want the color to be not quite so strong, you can change the opacity down. It'll give you a slightly less bright appearance. But when you say OK, you've got your nice jeweled LCJ instead of the metallic LCJ. You can do that if you want, but that's not required. What you do need to do is have at least something that looks like this right here. So go ahead, make that, save that, put it in your folder, and that's the assignment for this week. I'll see you next week.